Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
You know, some of these people, they may be crazy, but they're not stupid, and they figure things out. He ran 45 yards, they say, and he just went to it, and then boom.
United States, Donald Trump commenting on the gunman who is now in custody for allegedly opening fire at the White House Correspondents' Dinner in the Hilton Hotel in Washington on Saturday night. It is a Monday morning, April 27th, 2024, the fourth week of Easter. Hope you're having a beautiful Easter season. Thank you for joining us. We'll call this a very special edition of Catholic Connection because we are going to have a live update on the situation that happened over the weekend with one of our very own wonderful reporters, the White House correspondent for EWTN News Nightly, Eric Rosales, who was there, an experienced journalist. He's going to talk to us in detail about what he experienced and felt it, what it was like. And then we will have Matt Swaim with our Journey Home highlights, and then we will be having some wonderful time with the Most Reverend Daniel Thomas of the Diocese of Toledo regarding his very powerful letter in support of safeguarding women from Chemical Abortion Act. And he is, of course, the head of the pro-life committee for the USCCB, again, the bishop from Toledo, joining us for two segments this morning on a Monday. We will save the weather for a little bit later on. And again, the newscast we'll do in the second hour of Catholic Connection on EWTN Radio Extra, which will feature Matt Lamb from the College Fix and also Kevin Brennan, the Vice President of Catholic Charities in the U.S., a beautiful new ad campaign. We also have a very wonderful 2 cents about how religion is good for us, physically and emotionally. A lot more evidence to prove that. All right, first up, let's go to Eric Rosales, and of course you know him very well from his great work on EWTN News Nightly, and thanks be to God, everyone is fine. Eric is an experienced journalist, and he's covered, we were just talking about this in preparation for the show, covered a number of shootings, as we all have in the business. And Eric, I'm so glad that you're okay. You're a seasoned journalist, and so I know when you see something like this with your background, your mind automatically goes into news mode, and you try to get the information, and everyone was there, and it was just quite an hysterical situation for good reasons. First of all, thanks for joining us, and everybody is okay, and you're okay. Correct? You're fine this morning. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. It's great to be with you, Teresa. Good morning to you.
All right, so describe the situation. You were telling me before the show that the EWTN news table was pretty close to the situation.
Yes, it was. The table representing EWTN was positioned just about 20 yards from the ballroom entrance, and I tell you what, it was right at the entrance there of the ballroom is where the shots actually rang out, and that's where Secret Service ended up stopping the suspect before he made it inside the ballroom. He made it quite a distance from the lobby area all the way down to the ballroom. I mean, you saw how fast that the suspect ran past
right.
the metal detectors there. It was a pretty terrifying moment. I mean, we heard one shot, and then it was followed by 3 to 4 others. And, you know, having grown up not only in journalism, but also my father, he was a police officer for 43 years, so I immediately recognized the sounds as gunfire, and I grabbed my wife and I put her under the table and I told her to stay there. But at the same time, we are journalists. We want to be able to get these stories. So I began recording with my phone, and, you know, from the vantage point, I could see President Trump, Vice President Vance quickly escorted out. Security detail then sprang into action. They were literally jumping on chairs and tables just to get many of the cabinet members out, and other law enforcement like Steve Scalise and Speaker Johnson out of the room. Quite a terrifying moment, I tell you what.
You know, questions are always surfacing after an event like this, and we were talking again before the show. How could this have happened? We had Butler, Pennsylvania, then we had the gunman down in Florida at the golf course shooting at Donald Trump when he was still on the campaign trail before he was elected. And now this. It just seemed almost too easy for this man. What do you think?
You know, it was too easy. Security was lax. I mean, even my wife, prior to all this taking place, we walked in to the hotel, And first of all, we were met with protesters across the street who were yelling at us and saying that, we were part of the problem. We walked into the hotel room, and we were so surprised that we didn't have to show any tickets. We didn't have to show any identification. We didn't have to go through any metal detectors. And literally inside the lobby, there were people and families eating pizza that were hotel guests, eating pizza with their families because they go, oh, we're just enjoying the show because we're watching our favorite newscasters walk by. And even my wife was like, wow, you have the president here, you have the vice president, you have members of his cabinet, and how is it that we're not going through any sort of metal detectors or having a checklist, having our identification checked out before we walked into the lobby? Now, we did we went through a metal detector right before we went into the ballroom, but that was it. Mm-hmm. That was literally it. And even when we went into the ballroom, they didn't check our ticket. They asked for no identification, no driver's license, nothing. It was very, very lax in security.
If you're just joining us on Catholic Connection on a Monday morning, April 27th, 6 minutes past the hour, our guest is Eric Rosales of EWTN News, who was at the White House Correspondents' Dinner on Saturday with other members of our news team there when the shots broke out. Thanks be to God, everyone was able to get out safely. We were talking also, Eric, about the number of administration officials that were there. God forbid, had that man got through, he could have wiped out practically the entire administration.
Teresa, had this man ended up having some sort of explosive vest, and I suspect that's why you see the pictures of him with his face to the ground with no shirt on. I suspect that's why Secret Service and law enforcement immediately took off his clothes. But you have to just wonder, had this guy been able to get in, he had a shotgun, he had handgun, he had several knives, but he didn't even have to have that. All he had to have was just an explosive vest, and we wouldn't be here. And literally the president, vice president, members of the cabinet, law enforcement, and other lawmakers, they wouldn't be here as well. It's just baffling that security was so lax at that event with that many people.
So what are you hearing this morning? I'm sure you're working on this story over the weekend and preparing for tonight's News Nightly program. What is the latest on this? There's an arraignment set for today, correct?
Correct. An arraignment set for today. We're also understanding, they're checking out his home down in the California area. We understand that family members had actually contacted law enforcement prior to this event because they were concerned that he was going off the deep end. Just a variety of information is starting to come out about the suspect. And, this is a man who was, how can I put it, off his rocker and, just really needed some help there. And it seems like he wasn't able to get it, and he was just, he was determined, according to his manifesto, he was determined to get the job done, and that was, in fact, to kill the president. So that's pretty scary. And to do it in an event like this, it started out with just a beautiful event. We were there to honor journalism and the First Amendment, and it quickly turned into a scene of just confusion, fear, chaos, and it was quite scary. What was interesting, when we were all huddled underneath a table, I thought it was our White House producer, Toby, who was saying the St. Michael prayer. We heard it distinctly, but afterwards I asked him, were you saying the prayer? Because I heard the St. Michael prayer being read aloud. And he says no. So we have no idea. Veronica Dudo was there, also Owen Jensen and his wife, the White House correspondent Owen Jensen, he was there with his wife, and nobody said that they said it, but yet many of us heard it. And so we firmly believe that God was there with us guardian angels were there protecting us. Even St. Michael himself, who knows? We are just thankful to God that we, in fact, all of us were spared.
Amen to that. And I'm sure you were all praying in your own way, too, when something like that happens, right?
Oh, most definitely. Most definitely. I mean, we knew that God was there protecting us at that moment. You know, my wife immediately, she, you know, we own a preschool out in California, so she's not used to this. You know, when we hear gunfire, a lot of times, Therese says, you know, as journalists, we run to it because we want to find out the story.
Exactly.
But my wife is not used to this. She immediately said that she wants to go home. And I said, okay, yes, but we need to stay down first and listen to law enforcement so that we can end up, you know, going out with everybody. We actually did try to leave at one point, and Secret Service was keeping everybody in the room. They just wanted to secure the area and make sure that there was just, in fact, one shooter. But then they ended up allowing us to leave. And at one time they said that they were going to continue on with the event. The organizer from the White House Correspondents Association came to the mic and said that we were going to continue the event if everybody can just stay seated. But then it was later on, about 30 minutes later, that she came back on and said, no, as protocol for Secret Service, the event is canceled, and we are advising everybody to go home. So it's
supposed to be held in a month. Is that still the case? Any news about it? Has it been rescheduled? Because I thought I read something about it being held 30 days later.
Correct. Well, that was a statement that President Trump said during his press conference. He said that he wants to have it held within 30 days. Now, you have to think about, you know, the protocol of, okay, what sort of extra security do they have to do? And I know that members of the White House Correspondents Association, they were actually at the hotel the very next day, and I believe they were talking to the hotel about organizing something, yes, maybe 30 days, 45 days. It is supposed to happen again at the hotel there at the Washington Hilton. So we'll continue. You know, we'll give updates on that. But I tell you what, it's they're going to have a lot more security there. I suspect
this whole thing has got to be. They have to get to the
bottom.
bottom of this. This is just ridiculous at this point. I mean, you've got 3 attempts on this for anyone. I don't care if it's Trump or anybody else is in that kind of a position. But in the case of President Trump, this is a third time now. It's just awful. But Eric, we're so grateful for spending time with us this morning. I'm sure it was a very traumatic experience for you. I know you and I are used to reporting in big cities, and as you said, when we hear gunfire, we go toward it because that's our job. But it's a whole different ballgame when you're right in the middle of it. So thank you for joining us at this very, I'm sure, challenging time. And we look forward to your coverage this evening on EWTN News Nightly. And also, let's stay in touch, and I'd love to have you on another time this week as we get more information. Would you be okay with that?
Oh, most definitely, Teresa. God bless you. Thank you so much.
You too. Great job, and thank you so much for this update. Eric Rosales from EWTN News, EWTN News Nightly, who was there with several other EWTN employees over the weekend. Thanks be to God. Thank you, St. Michael, Jesus, Holy Mother Church, a Blessed Mother, that everyone is okay. But a lot more questions to answer. We'll be right back. It is a Monday, and that means, of course, it is time to bring on our dear friend, Matt Swaim from the Sunrise Morning Show, of course, but also the Journey Home and Journey Home highlights. Mateo, wow, never a dull moment in the world these days. Thanks for joining us. Busy, busy times.
Yeah, indeed. And I feel like I'm coming into like Starsky and Hutch music. Did Rich pick that?
Starsky and Hutch.
I lost my leisure.
I loved that show. I loved Starsky and Hutch. You're not old enough to remember Starsky and Hutch.
Hey, I'm an old soul, Teresa.
Okay. All right. That was a great program, by the way.
Indeed.
Loved it. All right. It's kind of exciting, though. Gets us geared up for the latest conversion story or reversion story. So what's happening tonight?
Oh, we got a wild one. Okay, so tonight will be Steve Sjogren. And Steve was a vineyard pastor and church planter for a number of years. And actually, people in the Cincinnati area might recall that the Tri-County Vineyard it's one of the largest vineyard churches in the country, and he helped plant that. He was actually back in the early days when the vineyard movement was springing out of the Calvary Chapel movement in California. He was kind of on the ground floor of that, so he was a pioneer. I mean, I don't know if the vineyard movement is big where you are in Michigan, but especially in places like California, actually really worldwide, this concept of the vineyard movement is huge in the United States. And there are a lot of mega churches that kind of trace their origins back to the ideas, kind of perpetuated by the vineyard movement, especially through the small group movement and servant leadership and that sort of thing. Well, Steve's a pioneer of that. And there are a whole bunch of things that factored into his journey to the Catholic faith. But he came in about 3, maybe 4 years ago. And he is actually a very large figure in that world. And as he and I were sort of discussing, he hasn't really told the whole world in this kind of way, where he's been and what he's been up to, because he sort of stepped out of the spotlight a little bit for a couple of years. And so pray for Steve, because this is going to be the first time that a lot of people have kind of figured out where his spiritual trajectory has taken him. And we don't often get that kind of guest where often when people come on the show, it's pretty public knowledge in their circles. But for Steve, because he was one of those people who was so sort of publicly known in a lot of different kinds of places, there'll be some people who flip through the channels and see him and are going to be taken a little bit aback as to where he is and what he's doing now.
But it is amazing, though, if you think about the power of someone when they know that they have to, that this is what God is calling them to do, and someone in that prominent of a position, and what he could lose, or maybe already be losing in terms of, worldly things. That's not the most important thing to him, obviously, but it's still a challenge, because if he was really one of the ones who started this movement, think about, the impact that could have on that very movement that's still existing.
Yeah, well, and I think you and I have talked before that the vineyard movement is kind of part of, it's sometimes looped in with third wave Pentecostalism, and the idea that Pentecostals are really open to the power of the Holy Spirit, to the idea of miracles, to God moving, to the Holy Spirit prompting them to say something to somebody in a moment. So that's all kind of part of that world. And he alludes to a lot of that. He has a funny story about how when he was running this massive vineyard in Cincinnati, and he was like a Best Buy or a Circuit City or something, and he saw the Archbishop of Cincinnati in the store, and they recognized one another. And Steve said at the time he wasn't sure exactly how this conversation was going to go down, but the Archbishop, who that was Archbishop Pilarczyk, kind of a dry sense of humor. He says, "So you got a lot of our Catholics go to your little vineyard church over there, don't they?" And he's like, yes, Archbishop, they do. He's like, when are you going to send them back?
Oh, that's funny.
And of course, he said it in sort of a dry, but deprecating way. But that stuck with Steve. And this was like back in the 90s or something, and it just stuck with Steve. That's one of many moments that were along the way. But also, he experienced, if you're church planting, you deal with a lot of drama. And a lot of that, caused Steve to ask questions like, what is it I'm doing? By planting a church in a world where there's 100 churches already in this town I'm going to plant, why am I planting this church? What am I hoping to restore, to recover, to foster in the life of the church? And he found that a lot of the things that he was working on, trying to kick off, trying to to get going, were things that actually were already existing and alive in the Catholic Church.
So what did he first, was there I know there's not, maybe, well, some people there might be, but was there more than one aha moment for him in terms of him stumbling onto the teachings, or in addition to the questions that he asked himself, as you just alluded to, what else took him on that path, would you say?
Yeah, so he talks a lot about servant leadership. Now, I don't know if you've ever picked this up, but Steve wrote actually a best-selling book called Conspiracy of Kindness, a unique approach to sharing the love of Jesus, and it's kind of one of the gold standards of servant leadership out there. And so this is a big aspect of Steve's story. So he'd go in and he'd church plant somewhere, and they'd walk into random small businesses and say, "Hey, do you mind if we clean your bathrooms for free?" And they'd be like, "What? Why? Why would you do a thing like that?" They're like, "Well, we think that's the kind of thing that Jesus would do." Right? And then the next thing these people are going to his churches. Or the other one that he shared was how they would do car washes at their church. They say $1. We'll wash your car for $1, and people would come through the car wash and be like, "Thank you," and hand Steve $1. He's like, no. We want to pay you $1 for the privilege of washing your car.
Wow.
And people were like, "What?" Well, you're right. Steve finds out that this kind of stuff is happening all the time with religious life, with people like Mother Teresa, people who are serving on the margins, who are laying down everything, who are recognizing Christ in the face of the people that the world has forgotten, who are living their whole lives like this. And that was very compelling to Steve. This idea of servant leadership, I mean, every religious order in the history of the church has been founded by a servant leader.
So what is he doing now professionally? What's his work?
Well, he's kind of retired, so this sort of happened after, kind of things broke down to him, and he's like, I got to step away from everything. And then COVID hit. And so he's still going around, still giving talks on servant leadership and things like that. But yeah, I'll be interested to see where him kind of coming out and saying this stuff on the journey home tonight. I'll be interested to see where that kind of takes him. I'll be interested to see how many of those people who he worked with will invite him back in to say, "Hey, Steve, why don't you explain a little bit more about your thought process here?" I think some doors are going to open from him being open to sharing his story tonight.
I bet he'll be popular on the Catholic speaker circuit soon, if he isn't already.
Yeah. But even just this idea of, we talk about how truth, beauty, and goodness are these three transcendentals that draw so many people to the faith. Truth is huge. We talk about it all the time on Catholic radio. Beauty is so powerful. We think of the images that you share from Italy all the time, and the pilgrims who go there are moved by beauty. But goodness, I think we underestimate the power of goodness and how showing the love of Christ to people can really convert hearts, especially when those people are hurting in some kind of way. And I hope that comes through in Steve's story tonight.
Yeah, that is so powerful. Okay, so this is tonight again. We're talking with Matt Swaim on a Monday morning. We do this every Monday because on Monday nights we have the beautiful program, The Journey Home. So just kind of repeat the guest if people are just tuning in. We have about 2 minutes left. Yeah,
so Steve Sjogren, a former Vineyard pastor and church planter, actually one of the pioneers of the Vineyard movement. If any of you have ever been to or seen Vineyard churches in your community, that's at 8 p.m. Eastern tonight on EWTN radio and television. And, Steve is like many of the people who we work with who are pastors. We've already had 50 pastors contact us so far.
That's amazing.
In 2026 looking for some kind of help, because It's not just about, can I find a new job in the church? It's about, what did my call mean? What was Christ asking me to do? And did I mishear that? What does it mean for me now? Like, these are the big questions. And I hope highlighting stories like Steve Sjogren's will really help remind even Catholics, like, what am I supposed to be doing? What has God called me to?
I'm wondering, Matt, and maybe you'll see this, maybe you're already hearing this because you're continually in contact with people who reach out to the Coming Home Network, but wondering if all these new Catholics coming in, and also the reverts that came in at the Easter Vigil, that story made big secular news. It was a big Easter story. It was in the New York Times. It was in all the different newscasts, secular and Catholic, of course. So you have to wonder, you'll probably be hearing from people, maybe you've already heard from them, who saw these stories and are really struggling with coming into the Catholic Church. So that, I think, is going to be a whole nother show that you can do and that we can explore. We're out of time, but look forward to catching up with you next Monday, God willing, a week from today, of course. Our friend Mateo, as I call him, from the Journey Home Network, Coming Home Network, and the Journey Home program, Monday nights on EWTN, and every morning on EWTN Radio with the wonderful Sunrise Morning Show with Anna Mitchell. We'll be right back. Always an honor and a blessing to be joined by our wonderful bishops, and Bishop Thomas has been a great supporter of EWTN, and he's been a great supporter of mine over the years. Does amazing work not only in the Diocese of Toledo, but with the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops and beyond, working very hard on the pro-life committee, and he's written a beautiful letter regarding the situation in the United States with the abortion pill. So I just want to read you a paragraph from a little story just to give you some background on this, and we'll bring the bishop up. He's with us this morning for 2 segments. Bishop Daniel E. Thomas of Toledo, Ohio, is chair of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops Committee on Pro-Life Activities and is offering his support to legislation that would revoke the Food and Drug Administration's approval of mifepristone for abortions. Okay, he wrote a beautiful letter that was dated April 1st to the lawmakers. Catholic teaching holds that all human life is sacred from the moment of conception until natural death, and that both the life of the mother and the preborn possess equal inherent dignity. I don't have time to go through the whole letter right now. We'll be going through parts of it, Your Excellency. But first of all, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate your time.
Teresa, pleasure to join you in this Easter season, and of course with all of our guests. And some might find it strange the letter's date was April 1st, but there's no fooling around this letter, I can tell you that.
No. And I was telling you during the break that what crossed my mind with all this talk over the weekend of the violence that happened on Saturday night and the violence going on in the world, I always go back to something that St. Mother Teresa of Calcutta said when she appeared in the United States many years ago and did a beautiful luncheon and made comments about abortion. And she was talking about peace. And this may even have been when she received the Nobel Peace Prize that she made the same comments about if we want peace, we have to stop killing our children. And you think about that. There is such a desensitization that continues to grow in terms of the sanctity of life. I really hope people begin to pay more attention to this, Your Excellency, and connect the dots here. What are your thoughts this morning?
Well, I think for decades we've realized that given the decades of the legalization of abortion, now, of course, even though the Supreme Court spoke, now states are capable of making their own legislation. I don't think we can underestimate the negative impact over decades that this has had regarding the desensitization for the value and dignity of life. I mean, we talk about things, even simple things like movies, and how the violence of movies has just escalated further and further and further to the point where it's almost like more and more and more violent, and we've become numb to it. I think the same is certainly true on a very human scale, and that is that violence against human dignity and personhood has increased exponentially. And over the decades, we've sadly been witnesses to that.
Mm-hmm. And whether it be, God forbid, the innocent child in the womb or someone with whom we disagree, it seems it doesn't matter. If I don't like you, if you're not convenient for me, there are ways to get around this, right?
Right. And in essence, Teresa, isn't that irrational? Mm-hmm. So rather than having an ideal that each person needs to be respected, and it seems like we have completely exited from the possibility of civil discourse. So to be able to say, I disagree with you, but I honor your humanity and the fact that you have the right to disagree and to have a different opinion, now it seems that that is put aside as well, as evidenced in these kinds of shootings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is absolutely amazing that we're surprised when we have a civil conversation with someone. I had this experience when Deacon Dom and I were at a Vatican event earlier this year for the patrons of the arts. Now, as you know, the Vatican patrons are open to anyone. There are many Catholics who want to support the arts at the Vatican, so they join. But there are many people who aren't because they appreciate the art that the Church gives us. And I sat next to the man who said, look, I'm a liberal. He says, I'm a Christian, but I'm a liberal. He says, I am pro-life, but I'm a liberal and everything else. And we sat there and we had a great conversation. We agreed on a lot more than we disagreed. And I said to my husband, I think that's the first conversation I've tried to have with someone, and that was a successful and a very peaceful one and a very fruitful one. But there's very few that I could say that I've had with people who disagree with us on the life issues or any of these issues that was calm and respectful. Isn't that a shame?
It's more than a shame. It's tragic. Mm-hmm. So I think, in so many ways, the whole idea that we stand for the dignity of human life has to take steps backward, even for society, even sadly for so many Catholics, and that is, I need to respect you as a person before we even get to the question of violence.
Right.
And if I respect you as a human person created in the image and likeness of God, then I'm going to respect the fact that you have a right to your opinion, you have a right to speak out in a public discourse, and you have a right to disagree. But don't condemn me because I disagree with you.
Right.
Don't plan an act of violence against me because my views may not match yours. So there has to be some middle ground, and isn't it life? Isn't it respect? I mean, with that very word, right? I mean, you look at centuries of war when they would go on the battlefield, and then they would pause the war, and they would get together. The generals would get together to speak historically about how is this going to go forward. So there was an incredible agreement that there were things which were a line that simply you didn't cross. And now it seems we've crossed that line, on so many levels.
Yeah. I really appreciated your letter. It was quite beautiful. And also, when we come back, we have about 2 minutes left, Your Excellency, before we take our first break. But
Sure.
the idea that women, in addition to the children in the innocent children in the womb, but what's going on with women and these abortion pills, this is insanity, I think, at a whole nother level. These women now have their homes as the abortion mill, and they become the abortionists by taking these pills. So the levels of trauma, not to mention the medical harm in which they're putting themselves, is just off the charts.
And that's very, very critical. I think it's something people don't necessarily think about. But the reality is that our care, of course, is for preborn children as well as, and no less than, their own mothers. So people don't take into account the fact that if these drugs are permitting women to commit this act of abortion in their own homes, then it's emotional trauma as well as possible serious medical trauma. Because as you say, well, it's in their own homes, it's in their own bathrooms. And chemical abortion, as it's become more widely available, more women experience this emotional toll of actually, Teresa, seeing their deceased child. And experts tell us that obviously, even in surgical abortion, they try not to permit the woman to actually physically see their child. And we know from our work with Catholic psychologists and abortion healing ministries like Project Rachel that women who've experienced chemical abortion can experience particularly grave trauma from that event.
Mm-hmm. And they know that in the abortion industry. That's why they don't want them seeing the ultrasound beforehand.
That's so true, because what a gift, isn't it, that technology has assisted us in this reality that we can actually show mothers their own children on sonograms. We can tell them, even to a certain point, obviously, when their sex develops, what their sex is. They can actually see the child physically, and I think that can help to change hearts and minds to life.
Amen. More on that when we come back. Your Excellency, thank you for your time. Bishop Daniel E. Thomas joining us. He'll be with us till the end of the show, the first hour of the show this morning. He's chair of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops Committee on Pro-Life Activities. Recently penned a beautiful letter to lawmakers regarding the abortion pill. More on the measure to stop that pill when we come back. Thanks for joining us on a Monday, 38 minutes past the hour. You are listening to EWTN's Catholic Connection, April 27th, having a very important conversation with wonderful Bishop Daniel E. Thomas of Toledo, Ohio, who chairs the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops Committee on Pro-Life Activities, offering the bishop's support for the legislation that would revoke the FDA's approval of mifepristone for abortions. So where are we now, Your Excellency, in terms of where this legislation stands? Are we close to seeing this come up in Congress? What's the latest you're hearing?
So the latest we're hearing is that we're waiting to see if it's going to come up for a vote. But I think it's important for our listeners, Teresa, to hear, of course, the title is the Safeguarding Women from Chemical Abortion Act. Mm-hmm. So that's the name of it. And fundamentally, Teresa, it does three things. So first, it would withdraw the U.S. Food and Drug Administration's approval of mifepristone pills for abortions. So it would take away that approval, which would be significant. Now, we know that it has some legitimate uses otherwise, but it's now principally used for taking the life of innocent children in the womb. So that's number one. It would remove the FDA approval. Number two, it would make labeling the drugs for abortion illegal. So they could not be marketed for that purpose with those labels on them, which would also be significant. And third, it would also provide a legal remedy for those injured by the drug to pursue claims against the drug's manufacturers. So keeping the women in mind who themselves were injured. So those are really the three things that this act does, and we're hoping beyond hope that it might get a good hearing.
No. Suffice it to say, when money comes calling, in terms of, I learned in J school early on, follow the money, these pharmaceutical companies don't want to be challenged, because with the reports that are coming out, and you know this, Your Excellency, the problems that women are having physically, emotionally, there's already a lot of evidence where I'm sure they could sue.
Absolutely. And obviously our hope is it would be brought for a vote and signed into law, so it would reduce the availability of this lethal drug. And even if it doesn't become law, Teresa, it could at least help to shine light and put more pressure on the FDA to act on this.
That is my hope and prayer for this, because one of my questions that I wanted to ask you, Your Excellency, it's so frustrating to me that I'm grateful that we have this audience. EWTN does have a large audience, but this needs to be all over the news as we get closer to moving this forward, so women and all of us know what's going on here.
Right, and I think it's helpful, Teresa, for all of our folks listening and folks who tune into EWTN. Catholics can help by contacting members of Congress in the House of Representatives and those in the Senate by urging them to advance this bill. And if it does approach a vote, and the USCCB can send out alert if it is, then it would be helpful for them to sign up at usccb.org/take-action so that they could take action to try to encourage their elected officials to vote in such a fashion.
So the proponents of the drug say, it's safe for women to take. Where are they getting? Of course, that's how they might as well just invent it. I know they do sometimes on the other side of this issue. They invent all kinds of things. But I just keep seeing more and more research of how problematic these pills are, in addition, obviously, to ending the life of the baby, but what happens to the mother.
Right. So in a nutshell, Teresa, chemical abortions now account for almost 2/3 of all U.S. abortions. So hundreds of thousands of preborn lives lost each year. And chemical abortion, not only lethal to the preborn child, but as we said, often harmful to women. And medically, it has a complication rate 4 times that of surgical abortion. And some studies have found as many as 1 out of 5 women will suffer a complication. And the complication rates, of course, could be even worse, but problems with chemical abortions are vastly underreported. And this is what people don't hear. One study estimates that the FDA's data is missing as many as 95% of all serious adverse events.
Wow.
Since 2016, the FDA no longer requires abortion bill prescribers to report any complications other than death. So that's why, we pushed, and now the FDA is just now conducting a new safety review into the dangers of abortion pills to women. But in the meantime, hundreds of thousands of women and preborn children are at risk. So it's never too late, and we want to make sure that the FDA is able to remove their endorsement and possibly through this investigation maybe come out with the right result and the right judgment.
In terms of their goal here, and I use that pronoun there, the abortion industry and so-called doctors, I don't even want to call them doctors because doctors are supposed to do no harm, but those who push abortion are abortion proponents, whether they be politicians or in the actual abortion industry. Are they trying to push these pills because there are fewer abortionists available? Obviously, it's the money. They can save money on staff. They can make money from the pharmaceutical companies. What do you think their main goal is here? To just increase abortions? Or is there another alternative, do you think, that they're looking for?
That's a good question, Teresa, and I don't know any statistics regarding the opinions of the doctors themselves, but I could say that I've heard that some of them want to say that it's much more private, that it does not put them into a situation where they have to, quote, go somewhere to have to have a procedure done, and if they can have it in their home, quote, and I've even heard this terminology, imagine, in the comfort of your own home.
Comfort of your own home. Okay, that's just lovely. Yeah.
So that's tragic to me, but also imagine the psychological trauma of it, and then how do you step away from that psychological trauma or heal when in fact it's happened in your own home or your own bathroom?
So what do we do? What's our responsibility now, in addition to the great work you're doing with this letter and approaching Congress about this and the Trump administration? Because if you think about it, those of us who work in the pro-life movement, and you've been involved in this in a very long time, when you look at the women and the impact, how do we reach these women who've had these abortions at home? Because now, and just last week, Your Excellency, I interviewed a wonderful woman, Lauren Mazuka from the Sidewalk Advocates for Life. She's saying that the new sidewalk is the home. And yet, if it's done in the home, we're less likely to meet those women, because if you're a sidewalk counselor, you see the women coming out, you can connect with them at least and give them information, and maybe they'll remember you. Maybe you can even give them a phone number. This is a whole different ballgame here. That's
so true, because sidewalk counseling was very public, wasn't it?
Right.
And now, in essence, this is very private. And, of course, the U.S. bishops have frequently stressed how the abortion pill represents an isolating and harmful response to women in need who deserve better in the form of compassionate accompaniment and meaningful support to help them welcome their children. So certainly one of the answers, I think, since we're not on a sidewalk physically, I think all of your listeners, Teresa, and we know well that the new horizon is, of course, social media. So I think we have to make available and accessible to women on social media, in charity, the truth about what they may or may not be looking to choose. And I think with social media, they can access that, but as long as our voice is out there, even with social media, it's much more important than having no voice at all, obviously, with social media.
And I think also making it aware in the parishes, using pamphlets, putting the pamphlets for Project Rachel, Rachel's Vineyard. And then I know my pastor frequently mentions, that there is help available. And if you're still feeling guilty about it, struggling with it, come to confession. God loves you. He doesn't want you to stay in that place of condemnation. So those subtle reminders along the way, correct?
And I think it's very, very critical that our folks know, and I've been saying this before, and certainly since I became the chairman of the pro-life committee for the bishops, that anyone, including anyone who's listening right now, anyone who has participated in an abortion, I want them to know that Christ wants to extend his mercy and his healing love. And the church offers confidential, compassionate support through diocesan project ministry, ministries, through hopeafterabortion.com, and of course on a parish level now, over 5 years anniversary that we've had Walking with Moms in Need, and on a parish level accompanying women in that way and trying to respond to their needs, and not only their needs but obviously certainly the needs of their children, and then what will their needs be, please God, after their child is born. So this a personal accompaniment, it slams right up against the sad and myopic interpretation that the church, quote, only cares for, the fetus. Absolutely not. The church cares for all life, principally, obviously, the life which is defenseless and the most weak and vulnerable within the womb, as well as the life of the mother. So, that argument falls away when people actually recognize what the church is about and what she's doing, certainly across our nation in parishes.
And also what we do in the church and what pro-life groups do, and especially all the activities, and you mentioned the Moms in Need program, think about a woman and they say, well, it's for the privacy. Now they can do this in the privacy of their own home. Basically what they're doing is forcing her to handle all of this on her own. There you go. Here's your pill. Take care of your problem. And yet what are we doing? We're saying the child is not a problem. The child is a gift from God. What can we do to help you?
Exactly. And ultimately, we don't want to isolate the mother.
Right.
So precisely what is happening is the mother becomes more and more isolated in struggling with this act. And the very thing that we're doing is the exact opposite. But by trying to reach out humanly, compassionately, lovingly, and to let them know that they are not alone, that they are not isolated, that they are loved, and that their child is loved as well.
Yeah, you think of the emotional trauma and the mental health, and I know your fellow bishop, the wonderful Bishop Burbidge down in Arlington, wrote a powerful, powerful letter on mental health and the crisis we're facing. And
Yes.
one of the big things he mentioned was about this isolation, overall isolation, right?
Exactly. And we've seen more and more, and Bishop Burbidge's work, if people have not read it, is very, very worth the reading. And we've seen more and more as bishops. I've seen it in my own diocese, and we're actually making an effort to begin a Catholic counselors network. Actually,
Yes.
it's already begun, and we're trying to see if we can have places in various parts of our diocese where underneath of our Catholic Charities umbrella, we can have really solid Catholic counseling and have outreach to anyone who desires it, and have places where our pastors and pastoral ministers can direct people who are in need and who are psychologically suffering with some type of trauma.
Yeah.
So it's really, we know that since COVID, this problem has just become rampant, and obviously we want to address this issue from a Catholic perspective.
Your Excellency, appreciate you spending extra time with us this morning. You are a gift. Where do we find your letter, and where can we find out more about the wonderful activities in the Diocese of Toledo and the Pro-Life Committee?
Well, thank you. I think for the Diocese of Toledo, if you just go to our website, you can find things there under Catholic Charities and our Office for Life and Justice. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that letter was likely published on the USCCB website.
Yes, it is,
so
as a matter of fact.
All those things available for folks to access.
Thank you so much. Look forward to talking to you again soon about some wonderful developments going on in the diocese. We'll be right back on a Monday. Let you know what's coming up in hour number 2 of Catholic Connection on our EWTN Radio Extra channel. Stay tuned. Joining us on Monday, and coming up on EWTN's Radio Extra, we'll have the full newscast and the weather for you as well. Appreciate Eric Rosales from EWTN News Nightly, EWTN News in general, coming on to speak with us. He and several members of our EWTN team, thanks be to God, everyone at the dinner on Saturday night is safe, but it was great to get his perspective, and I truly appreciate his perspective in particular because he and I have similar backgrounds as street reporters and anchors in the biz, and we've connected over the years. I saw him at a conference a few years ago. I've seen him at the March for Life. He does wonderful work. The whole team does. But again, a lot of questions remain, and we will be keeping in touch with the team during the week, as we always do, but more specifically because of the incident over the weekend. But I'm just encouraging you to stay tuned to EWTN and all of our news outlets regarding developments in this very important story. Coming up in the second hour of the program, for 2 cents, I heard probably one of the best homilies I've heard in a long time from a wonderful priest. I think I've mentioned that Deacon Dom and I are members of the English-speaking community in Assisi. There's a special Mass community, and yesterday, a wonderful elderly priest in his late 80s gave, Dominic and I were just like blown away. Not that I haven't heard great homilies before, but this one, incredibly impactful. I'll share some of that with you, and it ties in with the rest of what we're going to discuss in 2 cents in terms of how God gives and does not take away anything in light of the Good Shepherd Sunday yesterday. Matt Lamb from the College Fix joining us, Pro-Life States attracting med students, and then Kevin Brennan from the Catholic Charities, a beautiful new, wonderful ad campaign promoting the need for volunteerism. That's all coming up in about 3 minutes on EWTN's Radio Extra.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
Second hour of CC with TT on EWTN's Radio Extra, Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, Monday, April 27th, 2026. Good to have you with us, and we are moving along in the second part of our program. We'll continue the coverage of the news of the latest from the White House Correspondents' Dinner and the shooting there on Saturday night. Again, thanks be to God, no one was hurt. 2 cents this morning. We are going to be diving into Good Shepherd Sunday, which was yesterday. And I mentioned going into this second hour of the program that yesterday Deacon Dominic and I heard probably one of the most powerful homilies we've heard in a long time, in the sense of, I mean, we're blessed to be in a very Orthodox parish and we have great priests. But in this one, it was just so detailed, where this priest really took his time, and he speaks very good English. We don't have a recording of it. I followed him out of Mass. It was such a good homily. I'm chasing him down. Padre, Father. His Father Luciano, he was so cute. He's in his 80s. And I followed him into the sacristy. I'm the deacon's wife. I want a copy of your homily. He looked at me like I was crazy. Then I explained what I did, and he was fine. He whipped it out. He said, here you go, my dear, take it. It's just so beautiful, and it was so loving, because he's taking snippets of the gospel and talking about how God does not take anything away, how the church teachings don't take anything away, how what happens is just the opposite. You are truly happy, you are fulfilled, you're not going to be harmed by the world if you stay away from what the world offers, which is empty, but if you embrace what the church and what Jesus offer. I mean, it was just pow. I mean, I sat there, tears rolling down my face. It was just so fantastic. And we had a number of young people at this Mass, and there's several English Masses that take place in Assisi every weekend, but we prefer the 11 a.m. on Sundays. And Deacon Dom gets to serve there, and it's at St. Mary of the Angels. And there were a lot of young people there. I don't know if they were going to be there or not, but in the homily he mentioned many of the sources that are impacting young people negatively in terms of their salvation. So I'm just going to share some of that with you, and then also take a look at what some interesting studies are saying about the importance of religion in the lives of young people and all of us. Church Pop, EWTN's Church Pop, had a really cool story on that. And then there's another story featuring an atheist who's a sociologist who's written a book about how disconnected we are. It's a bestseller. It came out not too long ago. And what he says about religion and young people and how good it is for them. I wonder how long he's going to be an atheist. That's my question. Anyway, so that's 2 cents. And then Matt Lamb is going to be joining us from the College Fix, and we're going to talk about the fact, and this is very interesting, pro-life states are attracting medical students at the same rate as pro-choice states. And then wrapping up on a Monday morning with a delightful topic, Kevin Brennan, the Vice President of Catholic Charities USA, they have a really wonderful new ad campaign promoting volunteerism, as well as we'll learn about their traveling museum. So that's the program, the second hour of Catholic Connection on EWTN Radio Extra. Hope you can stay tuned for the rest of the show, as we say in the biz. All right, weather-wise, the National Weather Service is saying we have severe thunderstorms and the threat for excessive rainfall moving into the mid-Mississippi and lower Ohio valleys today. There is also potential, the Weather Service is saying, for a few strong tornadoes, damaging wind gusts, large hail, and scattered flash flooding. Low humidity and windy conditions will continue to produce elevated to critical fire weather conditions across the southern high plains into the middle of the week. Let's get started now with the news. It is a Monday morning here on EWTN's Radio Extra. Update on the shooting over the weekend. Mark Mayfield tells us President Trump is now talking about the alleged gunman at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
Trump spoke with CBS News 60 Minutes on Sunday.
You know, some of these people, they may be crazy, but they're not stupid, and they figure things out. He ran 45 yards, they say, and he just went to it, and then, boom, he popped through it.
The president said the man's speed was rather incredible. He was like a blur. He was asked how the man got that close, even though the place was surrounded with security, with Trump saying the man just took off through the metal detectors. Suspect Cole Allen lives in the Los Angeles suburb of Torrance, where FBI teams executed search warrants, along with questioning family members and going door to door in the neighborhood. Allen is in police custody, expected to be arraigned on federal charges today. I'm Mark Mayfield.
Attorney General Todd Blanche, meanwhile, praising the quick response to a shooting at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Appearing on ABC's This Week yesterday, he said the system worked and kept President Trump and other leaders safe.
Law enforcement and the Secret Service protected all of us. The man barely got past the perimeter, and so when you have a perimeter designed to keep people safe like President Trump, and it works, that's something that should be applauded.
Authorities say Allen tried again, as you heard earlier, to rush through the checkpoint armed with 2 guns and multiple knives and exchange gunfire with law enforcement before being apprehended. And Scott Carr tells us the Attorney General, Acting Attorney General Blanche, also says Preliminary findings suggest the president and the administration officials were the target of the suspected gunman at that dinner over the weekend.
Law enforcement and the Secret Service protected all of us. The man barely got past the perimeter. And so when you have a perimeter designed to keep people safe like President Trump, and it works, that's something that should be applauded.
Following the news of the shooting at the White House Correspondents Association dinner, Archbishop Paul S. Coakley, president of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, offering the following statement. He said, "We are grateful the lives of the president, those who protect him, and everyone in attendance last night were spared from serious harm. Let us all pray for our elected leaders and public officials that they may receive God's blessings, because human life is a precious gift. There is no room for violence of any kind in our society." EWTN News also reporting Bishop Robert Barron of Winona, Rochester, Minnesota, posting on X yesterday that he's grateful the president and his entourage are unhurt after the latest attack. He said, "May I raise my voice against the viciousness and tribalism so prevalent on the internet that does contribute mightily to the violence we see in our political culture. Can we please," he says, "remember that it is possible to disagree with the politician's ideas without demonizing and dehumanizing him? Jesus commanded us to love our enemies, and that includes our ideological opponents." And Congressman Ro Khanna wants to create a bipartisan commission on political violence after the weekend shooting at the annual White House Correspondents' Dinner.
We should look at social media, we should look at mental health issues, we should look at language, but we need to do something to bring the temperature down.
The Democrat speaking on Meet the Press yesterday said the weight of our words matters. He said, adding, "We need to be very measured in the way we use them." Authorities again believe the gunman was trying to target Trump administration officials. A Secret Service officer was shot during the commotion, with the agency crediting his ballistic vest for having helped avoid a potential tragedy. In other news this morning, Michael Kastner tells us Iran reportedly has a new proposal to reopen the Strait of Hormuz.
According to sources with knowledge of the effort, the plan would reopen the critical maritime passageway and the U.S. blockade of Iranian ports would be lifted. Discussions about Iran's nuclear ambitions would take place at a later date, only after the blockade is ended. Diplomatic efforts organized by Pakistan have hit a stalemate in recent days, and the White House is using its blockade as leverage. I'm Michael Kastner.
Former U.S. Attorney General Bill Barr making the case for America's war with Iran as meeting Catholic criteria for a just war. EWTN News explains Barr, a Catholic, said because Iran's potential use of nuclear weapons posed a legitimate threat to our country, Europe, and the Middle East, the war does not violate the just war doctrine. Barr saying the Iran war doesn't clearly violate just war doctrine. He said this during an April 23rd panel discussion hosted by the Napa Institute in California. He's a former board member at the Catholic Information Center and said the U.S. faced difficult questions dealing with nuclear weapons and argued allowing the window of opportunity to dismantle Iran's nuclear capabilities to pass by would result in grave consequences. And as he prayed the Regina Coeli, the Holy Father inviting the faithful to trust the Lord, warning against ourselves being deceived by thieves who seek to destroy our joy, leading us astray. Pope Leo XIV offering his reminder during his Regina Coeli address in the Vatican on Sunday. Before reciting the midday Marian prayer of the Easter season, the Holy Father inviting the faithful to keep their eyes and hearts focused on the gifts that nourish faith and joy while remaining vigilant against anything that may undermine them. The Holy Father began by recalling the day's reading from the Gospel of John, in which Jesus compares himself to both the shepherd and the gate of the sheepfold, highlighting the contrast between the shepherd and the thief. He explained that Jesus distinguishes clearly between the two. The shepherd enters through the gate because of his bond with the sheep, while the other, who claims in another way, reveals himself as a thief intent on harm. Christ, by contrast, the Holy Father stressed, comes so that all may have life and have it in abundance. The Holy Father emphasizing our Lord is bound to us by a relationship of friendship. He knows us, calls us by name, guides us, and seeks us out when we are lost, caring for us with tenderness. The Holy Father also stressing that Jesus does not come to take away our life or freedom, but to lead us along the right path. And rather than deceiving our conscience, the Holy Father underscored, the Lord enlightens it. And rather than diminishing our joys, the Pope continued, Jesus opens them to a deeper and lasting happiness. At least 2 people are dead after a weekend of wild weather in Texas. Authorities say 1 person was killed and several more were hurt when storms tore through Wise County in North Texas. Preliminary information from the National Weather Service shows an outbreak of 7 tornadoes across the region over the weekend. A second death was reported west of Fort Worth due to severe winds. And information from official sources shows the state of Texas has more natural disasters than any other state. The National Hurricane Center and the Storm Prediction Center, along with the U.S. Geological Survey, keep track of every hurricane landfall, tornado touchdown, and significant earthquake in all 50 states. And between 2025 and 2024, Texas happened to record more than 2,700 natural disasters, more than twice as many as Florida. And Texas has also been hit by 4 hurricanes in that period and was also on the receiving end of more lightning strikes than any other state. Tammy Trujillo tells us that coming up in the business week ahead, the spotlight will be on the Federal Reserve as the nation's central bank announces its latest decision on interest rates.
That happens on Wednesday, with the Fed widely expected to hold rates steady, with Jerome Powell's term as chair winding down next month. Also happening on Wednesday, investors will be keeping an eye on tech earnings, with Meta, Google, Amazon, and Microsoft all due to report. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
Finally, in our news segment, at almost 12 minutes past the hour, King Charles and Queen Camilla starting their trip to the U.S. today. The UK's royal couple is set for a 6-day visit that will begin in Washington with a visit with President Trump at the White House this afternoon, and then they will stop in New York City and Virginia. King Charles is also expected to address both chambers of Congress, and that's expected to happen tomorrow. And just a reminder, if you're just tuning in now in the second hour of EWTN's Catholic Connection on Radio Extra, we have a great lineup for you in terms of guests. Our 2 Cent segment I think you'll enjoy as well. I'm going to take you to St. Mary of the Angels in Assisi, where we attended Mass yesterday and heard an amazing homily, probably one of the best I've heard in a long time, tying in beautifully with some new research on that God gives and does not take away. This is all related. Trust me, it'll make sense at some point. And then we're going to talk with Matt Lamb, the College Fix, and we're going to be discussing how pro-life states are attracting medical students, and isn't this interesting, at the same rate as pro-choice states. And then there's research, speaking of research, that volunteering is very good for your health, and not just your mental health in terms of socialization, but the fact that when you do give instead of just receiving, as St. Francis says, is the giving that we receive and the dying that we are born to eternal life, it really does help you in so many ways. And we're going to be talking about volunteering with Kevin Brennan, who's the Vice President of Catholic Charities USA. They have a beautiful new ad campaign on volunteerism and also their traveling museum. So pretty jam-packed hour. We hope you can stay tuned for the rest of the program. Another 45 minutes of great Catholic information for you here on EWTN's Radio Extra. We'll be right back on a Monday. Hope you're having a great day. It is a Monday in the 4th week of Easter. Good to be with you on EWTN's. I was going to say EWTN's Catholic Connection, which I already said, but EWTN Radio Extra. Sorry, my brain's fried. I was up late last night doing a lot of research for the show, and then again this morning up early. Okay, so we're back in Italy for a couple of months, a couple of projects on which we're working, preparing for some pilgrimages later this year. Also going to be presenting, I'm so excited, at the EWTN Academy, which hosts young journalists. And it's really going to be fun. I've always wanted to present there, but I haven't been available because of my crazy schedule. But this year it happened to work, thanks be to God. And so we're here for a few months. And again, work to be done. But every day we'll be with you, God willing, live from Italy and telling you about life here, but also about activities in the church in which we're involved and other things coming to you from the, of course, area of the great St. Francis of Assisi, near Assisi, which is where we live part-time, in the year of St. Francis. So yesterday we know in the church it was called Good Shepherd Sunday. And as I mentioned before, Deacon Don and I discussed actually joining this wonderful community in Assisi known as the English-speaking Mass community. And there's a beautiful website, and I'll give you that before we wrap up today. but it allows anyone who's English speaking who desires to hear a Mass in English. I mean, obviously you go to Mass, Mass is Mass, you can have your Magnificat, you can have your of course, devotionals with you, and it's still the Mass, you follow along in the readings. But it is really nice to connect with others who are desiring to hear the Mass in English. So there's this beautiful group of lay people, and we actually had Heather on, and Heather and their husband Josh. Josh is the music director for all these Masses, making these beautiful Masses available. And as I mentioned earlier, we really enjoy the 11 a.m. Mass on Sundays, and Deacon Dom gets to serve there, so it's really nice, and it's become part of our lives. There are always different priests, and they're mostly Italian, and they're the Franciscans that are serving in the Franciscan community in St. Mary of the Angels, which is a beautiful basilica, which is below the town of Assisi, and the city, St. Mary of the Angels, is named after the church. Now, this is a very important church, and I would argue to say, and I mentioned this in my new book, and I also mention it in the EWTN series on St. Francis. We have the book coming out in June. The series is already available at the Learn, of course, Mission Advancement, EWTN.com/St. Francis. But the Basilica of St. Mary of the Angels is just as important as a burial place of the great St. Francis, which is in Assisi, and of course is named after him, because the Basilica of St. Mary of the Angels houses not only the Portiuncula, or the little portion church that Francis rebuilt and loved so much, but it's also where he ran the Friars Minor for many years, where he conferred the habit on St. Clare of Assisi. It is where he went to meet Sister Death, where he passed away in 1226, and the Chapel of the Transit is there in the church as well. So Mass is in the side chapel, and we try to go there every week if we can. We do have Mass in our little village here as well, which is also lovely. It's in Italian, but it's beautiful. And yesterday, you don't know what priest you're going to get, because the priests volunteer, those who can speak English, come, and they love to greet the Americans and the Brits and the Australians, anyone else who's coming there to hear an English Mass. And they're all great, but particularly this particular priest was so amazing. An older priest in his late 80s, from what I understand. His name is Father Luciano. And as I mentioned, yesterday was all about Good Shepherd Sunday. And he actually gave me his copy of his homily. I don't have time to read the whole thing, and it's quite long. It was about a 20-minute homily, and it's over 3 pages long. But I just want to bring out a couple of the points that he made. The Holy Father stressed this as well. And so they were kind of speaking at the same time, if you think about of course, Regina Celli on Sundays and what's happening in Rome, and the Masses going on at the same time. We are told by the world that Jesus wants to take everything away, that being a Christian, especially a Catholic Christian, is so restrictive, is so oppressive. Why would anyone want to be a member of the Holy Catholic Church? And you know what? It's just the opposite. I have come to give you life, it says in John 10:10, so you may have it abundantly. So let me just read you a few paragraphs of this beautiful homily from Father Luciano, who celebrated Mass yesterday at St. Mary of the Angels in Assisi. This gospel presents us with one of the most comforting and powerful images in the entire gospel, Jesus as shepherd and as door. These are not simply poetic images. They are a precise revelation of who Christ is and how one truly enters salvation. Jesus begins by contrasting two figures. On the one hand, the true shepherd, on the other hand, the thief and the bandit. Not all guides are worth following. There are some who promise happiness, independence, success, pleasure, and self-affirmation. But instead they empty the soul, divide the family, ruin the conscience, and distance one from God. The thief, Jesus says, comes to kill, steal, and destroy. The devil acts this way, the world acts this way, and temptation too. Initially presenting itself as a small shortcut, but then it steals peace, causes a loss of God's grace, and slowly destroys the person. When Jesus speaks of thieves and bandits, he's not referring only to external enemies in a generic sense, but also to all those people who in real life present themselves as guides, but instead lead us away from Christ. A thief and a bandit is anyone who teaches young people that purity is useless, that chastity is impossible, but that the important thing is to try everything and follow your instincts. A thief and a bandit is anyone who within a school, a group of friends, a workplace, or even within the same family ridicules a young person from wanting to live as a true Christian, or insinuates that to be modern one must distance himself from the church. Or perhaps those who present sin as a form of freedom and obedience to God as slavery. There are also some more subtle, more elegant, seemingly respectable bad teachers who speak with cultured and reassuring language, but who empty faith from within. He goes on to talk about a number of hot-button issues. He mentions abortion. He mentions, again, you heard chastity. He talks about the over-sexualization of the culture. And he says that the church gives just the opposite of what the world offers, and that God does not take away but gives abundantly. We are running out of time in this segment. Maybe I'll read the rest of this homily day by day because it's that long but that powerful. But I do want to play a clip of this psychologist. And he was recently on The Daily Show, and he's written a very powerful book about distraction. And I want to play this short clip as we go into the break of how he says why religion is so good for us, especially for young people. Take a listen.
Religious people are a little happier than non-religious people. That's been true for a long time. Just as married people are happier than non-married people. On average, your mileage may vary, but people need to be tied in, locked in a community. I'm a big fan of Emile Durkheim, the sociologist, is my favorite thinker of all time. When we're not tied in, locked in, we're free, but that doesn't make us happy. We have nothing to push against. We have no sense of meaning. It's like if you try to raise a plant, not in the ground, but just like up in the air, and it just can't be done. And so religious kids are rooted in traditions, faith, rituals, community. They go to church every Sunday. The Jewish kids have Shabbat. They literally can't use electronics for a day. So they were always happier than the secular kids. But what happens after 2012, it's quite remarkable in all the graphs. The religious kids get a little more anxious and depressed. The secular kids get much more anxious and depressed. So what I'm saying is, especially if you're an atheist, you're going to have to work much harder. You're going to have to be much more intentional about rooting your kid in stable social relationships. If you give him an iPad, then he graduates to a phone, and it's all this network, that network, interacting with strangers and weirdos and bots and AIs, that's not a community. That's crazy making.
So that is the author of the book, The Anxious Generation, that came out just over a year ago. It's an excellent book in terms of research, and the researcher and the author is Jonathan Haidt, and again, he was interviewed on The Daily Show, and I found that comment fascinating. More and more evidence showing the goodness of God and what it does for us, not only emotionally, not over physically, but just for our overall well-being. And the evidence is there. And then I want to encourage you to go to Church Pop. Of course, it's a great little outlet that we have at EWTN. And there's another very interesting article on that outlet about how a doctor of internal medicine is citing evidence, bringing together several studies. I don't have time to go into all that research, but bringing together a number of studies showing similar results, not just for young people, though, but for all of us. The importance of going to Mass, receiving frequent confession, being with people, right? Doing what we do as Catholics, praying the rosary together, Bible study. All of these things impact our health, mentally and physically, in a positive way. God is good all the time. All the time, God is good. He doesn't take away. He gives everything. We'll be right back. Minutes past the hour. It is a Monday morning edition of Catholic Connection, April 27th, the fourth week of Easter, 2026. Another resource I love is the College Fix, thecollegefix.com, which covers all kinds of Catholic and faithful news and conservative news on campuses from a wonderful perspective. And also it has great training for young people. We'll get into that as well. But always great to catch up with our friends from, of course, the wonderful College Fix. We've got a couple of stories we're going to talk about. Of course, our guest this morning is the wonderful Matt Lamb, who is with the College Fix. And we're going to talk about this big pro-life story in a few minutes. Pro-life states attracting medical students at the same rate as pro-choice states. But Matt has an update for us on another very interesting and breaking development in the college world. Matt, why don't you tell us about this? And this is in relationship to a story at the University of Nebraska, correct?
Correct. So a year ago, there was a graduate student who performed a so-called drag show mass, and I say that sarcastically, that mocked the Roman Catholic Mass, all of the components of the Mass. It was called the Gloria, the Agnus Dei, very offensive and inappropriate. At the time, Chancellor Rodney Bennett and President Jeffrey Gold promised Bishop James Conley, who of course is the bishop for the Diocese of Lincoln, that they would create this advisory roundtable on community engagement. They would look into it. It would include experts. Well, for almost a year now, because we're approaching summer 2026, the College Fix has been trying to find out who's on the committee. How do people reach out? If it's about community engagement, shouldn't there be a way for, I don't know, the community to engage with the council?
To engage, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it looks like Friday afternoon, sometime Friday, Bishop Conley posted an update where he said it's being led by Father Hendrickson, who is a Jesuit priest and the president of Creighton University in Omaha. The committee has met twice. They will not be disclosing the members of the committee. However, the school did apologize for this project, this drag show, which was actually the student's PhD thesis for his musical composition degree. And that, they agreed it was offensive. They agreed, it should have been handled better. There should have been different processes in place. So there has been some progress in looking into it. And look, I'm willing to defer to Bishop Conley. That's his diocese. He has the jurisdiction. I'm just a layperson. However, the University of Nebraska was hiding a lot of details from the public. And they said there's no contact information. They didn't have any minutes or agenda. They didn't have any spending logs. So for almost a year now, they had been promising community engagement, but there was no way for the community to actually engage with this council and provide their own input.
So then these people that the bishop mentioned, did he choose them or the university chose them?
The university chose them, and until now, no one really knew who was on this council. So this was chosen by the leadership of the University of Nebraska in consultation with Father Hendrickson at Creighton University.
So the bishop said that they apologized for the mistakes, as you mentioned. But do you think they're going any further with this, or do you think they just did this maybe to appease the situation and calm down the media around it? I'm talking about the university.
I think they did it just to calm down, because they said they have not even met since August. And again, there was no way. If the purpose of this committee was twofold, as promised. So it was, one, to look into the thesis, this drag show, and then two, to prevent future problems. But there was no way, as far as I could tell from all the digging and looking on the website, for, let's say, a graduate student at the University of Nebraska, Omaha, where I actually went for grad school, if they saw something on their campus that they thought needed investigation, or if there was a similar controversy at another campus, there was no clear way for someone to go to this council and ask them to look into it or to find some sort of resolution. I'm generally skeptical of all university committees, and I'll give you a brief reason why in addition to this. The University of Michigan, a couple years ago, there was a lot of controversy. There was a great pro-life doctor, medical professor named Kristen Collier.
Yep, I remember this story. Go ahead.
Yep. And thankfully, the med school, they did not cancel her speech. It wasn't even about abortion, although that would have been fine. It was like a white coat ceremony. Anyways, they said, well, we're going to host a forum about diversity of views and why that's important. And they could never tell us, did it happen? And then eventually they said, well, it did happen, but all the speakers were liberal. They were all about social justice and health equity. So I generally think these university committees are really just, a way to kind of deflect flack for long enough until people forget about it. But at thecollegefix.com, I always have a bone to pick, so I will keep harassing you month after month if you promise to do something, especially when it comes to the Catholic faith.
Well, I mean, Bishop Conley is an excellent bishop, and he responds to things like this, and so I'm sure that they'll keep on top of it too, because it's utterly ridiculous what's happening at these colleges. Now, for some good news, we only have about 2 minutes left, but we have pro-life states more likely to attract minorities as medical residents, research shows. So this is a good story, right?
Yes. So we had a series of articles at thecollegefix.com, And this one examined a paper which claimed that pro-abortion states were attracting more medical residents. So this is after you graduate medical school, you get further training in your specialty, obstetrics, cardiology, etc. The paper claimed that pro-abortion states were doing better, but when we dug into the data, we found two things. One, any difference was pretty small. Both pro-life and pro-abortion states had more residency applicants, had more people. It was like 27.2 for pro-abortion and 26.1 for pro-life states or something like that. Mm-hmm. Furthermore, racial minorities who tend to vote Democrat, just a fact, they were actually applying to pro-life states. They were actually more likely to apply to a pro-life state, as were male residents. So this sort of clear-cut claim by the author of this piece, by the author of the academic article, was really not as clear. And in fact, Dr. Michael New said, yes, there was a slight difference, but there's really no proof that pro-life states are facing a residency shortage. And this was backed up by new data from the National Resident Matching Program in March, which I think we found that was basically 99% of slots in both pro-life and pro-choice states were filled for residency training.
So what do you think this says, that the medical community, those who are studying medicine, are they interested then in more pro-life? I mean, having at least an option when they go to medical school?
I think it's more that there's indifference. So very few doctors actually commit abortions. I think there's other factors at play. So, for example, one theory I have is that a lot of the red states have large cities with high populations of racial minorities. If you think of, for example, Atlanta in Georgia or cities in Alabama. And I also think there's just different factors at play. People want to be close to family. You know, you may want to go to California, but the cost of living is much better probably in Tuscaloosa than in San Francisco. So I really think it's not that a lot of medical residents are interested in pro-life as much as few are interested in abortion.
Well, that's good news on one end. Matt, thanks. I've covered a lot in 7 minutes. We'll have you on again real soon. Matt Lamb from thecollegefix.com. We'll be right back.
Often, we think of a neighbor as just someone who lives nearby.
But it's more than simple geography.
Being a neighbor is how you show up in moments of need, when things are unsure.
When small acts can be huge.
And you're a light in someone's darkest moment, showing up again and again to faithfully serve.
That's the neighbor. Be the hope around the corner, in your neighborhood, nationwide.
Find your local Catholic Charities agency.
Great new spot, as we say in the biz, from our friends at Catholic Charities. Kevin Brennan is the VP of Catholic Charities USA, and we're talking about their brand new ad campaign, Promoting Volunteerism. Kevin, thanks for joining us. And what a cool ad. It's so upbeat and I think appealing to people who might be interested in volunteering.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Really the idea behind the ad, as you said, we're hoping to promote, encourage people to find ways to help those who are most in need in their communities. And really, when we think of the 169 Catholic Charities agencies around the country, what it's all about is being a good neighbor, right? Finding in your local community the people who are most in need, who are struggling in different ways, and kind of doing as we're called to in the gospel, loving your neighbor and coming to their aid. And that's what our Catholic Charities agencies do around the country. We have more than 200,000 volunteers nationwide, but certainly there's the needs are growing, and all of our agencies would love more volunteers in their communities. So we hope that the ad resonates with folks.
What types of volunteerism? I mean, there's so many ways, but can you give us some examples of how people may get involved right in their own neighborhood?
Sure, absolutely. One of the things we say about the Catholic Charities Network is if you've been to one Catholic Charities agency, you've been to one Catholic Charities agency. And what we mean by that is each agency is unique in its services and programs, and that's because each Catholic Charities agency tailors its programs to the specific needs of the vulnerable members of its community. So depending on where you live, the offerings may be different. What is the same across every Catholic Charities agency around the United States is the mission, right? To serve those most in need, to find a way to offer, compassionate support to people who come to us looking for a hand up. And so, speaking broadly, certainly the most common service area that Catholic Charities agencies perform is in, the food and nutrition space. And so many volunteers will work at a food pantry or a soup kitchen, helping to provide, nutritious meals and groceries to hungry people in their communities. But there are so many different types of, volunteer programs, helping seniors, delivering, meals and supplies to homebound seniors, volunteering with, disabled neighbors. There's job preparedness and training. That's a common one where you can, use your own professional skills to help those who are looking to advance their own careers. So really, it runs the gamut. If you can think of a category of human suffering, it's likely that Catholic Charities agencies help address that category.
Are you finding, Kevin, and by the way, if you're joining us on Catholic Connection, we're talking with Kevin Brennan, Vice President of Catholic Charities USA, and their beautiful new ad campaign. Are you finding that those who are volunteering are not just those, let's say, in retirement age, that there's more younger people? What would you say? What does it look like out there?
Yeah, certainly the age of the volunteers, it goes from, really high school age students all the way to, as you said, retired seniors. It does run the gamut. And so there are opportunities, no matter what your age is, no matter where you are, there are ways for you to get involved and help people near you who are in need. And that's really one of the things we're emphasizing with this campaign, that sometimes, especially when you think about large systematic, problems, hunger, right? It can seem impossible to think about a global challenge. Well, how could I help, where I am and from my perspective? Mm-hmm. But what we're trying to show with the ad is, no, there are people, likely blocks away from you who need help, and you might not realize it or know it, but if you visit your local Catholic Charities agency, they can tell you all about the various groups of people who are in need right in your neighborhood.
Now, we know that when you volunteer, you're helping others, as you said, right in your own backyard, but there's so much research out there. I did a whole chapter on this in one of my earlier books, God's Bucket List, about the benefits for those who are volunteering. Those who are doing the volunteer work benefit greatly as well.
Absolutely. One of the things we hear most commonly from volunteers across the Catholic Charities Network is people saying, I received more than I gave when I performed this volunteer work. And we think that this is especially crucial now that we're in an age where, a lot has been written about the kind of epidemic of loneliness.
Loneliness, yeah.
Especially among young men. Our digital world has advanced so much, and there have been great things that have come from that, but that has also led many of us to live more isolated lives where we can work from home and so much entertainment is at home. And volunteering is a way for you to get out in your community, to accompany people, to meet, human beings, your neighbors who have different experiences than you might and who are struggling. And one, it just feels good to be with other human beings, right? But it feels especially good when you are tangibly helping another person, helping them through a struggle, whether it be, it could be a massive, the most difficult moment of their life, or it could be a more routine challenge that someone is facing. I think we all have had that experience in our life, be it with family members or others, that when you help someone, it feels good. And so really, if you talk to someone who volunteers with the Catholic Charities Network, universally, they're going to talk to you about how good it makes them feel. And so that's definitely something we encourage others to take advantage of and get that feeling as well. That, as you said, you're helping another person, but you're also helping yourself.
Helping yourself, yeah. Do you find that those who volunteer, and maybe this varies, do they do it on a long-term basis and stick with the same type of activities? or do they move around to different areas in their neighborhoods?
I think it varies, and we have some throughout the Catholic Charities Network, some volunteers who play incredibly crucial roles for their local Catholic Charities agencies, who run programs that serve thousands of people because they're such dedicated volunteers, and they essentially create, in retirement potentially, or even while they're still working, almost a second full-time job as a volunteer, and God bless those people, obviously. We have other volunteers who maybe they first encounter a Catholic Charities program in their community through a group volunteer outing, right? Through school or through their office going and volunteering, and then they get hooked kind of on the exact feeling that we were just speaking about how good it feels to help others, and they start volunteering more long term with their local Catholic Charities agencies. So we see kind of all kinds of volunteers in terms of whether they bounce around or stay in the same role for years and years and years.
Yeah. So in terms of the market outreach, the campaign, where are the ads being shown, and how long will they be out there on the airwaves?
Yep, the ads are running pretty broadly across a number of Catholic media outlets, some other broader Christian publications, as well as non-faith-based cable news networks, some popular websites, podcasts, etc. So it's a pretty broad ad buy. This first kind of run of the ads is running through the end of May, so the end of next month, but then there will be 2 other rounds of advertising before the end of the year.
Okay, and they started when, Kevin? When did they start running?
They started about 2 weeks ago.
Okay. So I'm sure you've seen a response already.
We have. We've seen. We're getting really great feedback on the creative. The ad was produced. It's an animated piece. I know you played the audio earlier, but I think people will really enjoy, if they haven't seen it yet, the animation. You can see the ad at CatholicCharitiesUSA.org. But we're getting really great feedback, both to the actual creative product and kind of that it's interesting and different, but also, as you said, to the message. We think it's a message that resonates with so many people right now that are looking for ways to be a good neighbor.
Now, the ad campaign will also direct people to what's known as your traveling museum. Tell us about that.
Yeah, we intentionally scheduled the campaign to correspond with the launch of the People of Hope Museum. So this is a traveling museum. It's in a digitally enhanced tractor-trailer truck that's traveling the country for 3 years, visiting communities all across the country, more than 150 communities, sharing stories of neighbors helping neighbors and hoping to spread hope. The stories within the museum are stories from Catholic Charities staff members and volunteers throughout the country. And the prompt that we asked these women and men of the Catholic Charities Network was, who's the one person or the one family that you encountered through your service work who had the most profound impact on you? So it goes back to what we were discussing earlier. They're really profound and moving stories of service, both where you're hearing about a person in need, but you're also hearing from the perspective of the person who did the service, who's talking about how helping this other person or this family changed them and deepened their faith.
This is so cool. I'm looking at the pictures of this on the website, but I want to read this for our listeners. From March to December of 2026, the museum will progress through 21 states, from Texas to Ohio and from Maine to Florida, mostly in the eastern half of the country. We'll then tour the western states next year, 27. In the first half of 2028, we'll visit places missed or that we would like to repeat. Now, what if your state isn't mentioned? Can you request a visit, Kevin?
All of the visits are planned in concert with the local Catholic Charities agencies and the local dioceses across the country. But really, Hawaii and Alaska are more challenging for geographic reasons, although we have some potential hopes
you could
and
put
plans.
it on a ship, right? On a freight ship or something, a freighter?
Well, we're exploring what we can do there. We have some potential plans there. But really, we're going to be we expect to be in every state over the 3 years. And so if you go to peopleofhope.us, you can see the full list of tour stops for 2026. We've built that out. And that, as you said, is really the eastern half of the country this year. But then in 2027, we'll be all over the western half of the country. So if someone out there is interested in seeing the museum, we will be near you at some point. And you can, if you go to the website, peopleofhope.us, you can put in your information and get alerts about when the museum will be close by.
You know what's so cool about this, and I'm sure you've already talked about this and are doing things related, but it would be great to bring students through this. I mean, really. I mean, it's a great way to encourage more volunteerism, right?
Absolutely, and that's one of the target audiences for the museums, really kind of high school age young people and up. And we've already had a number of schools in the communities that we've been in over the first month or so of this 3-year tour. And the feedback has been great from the students. I was a few weeks ago with the museum in Boston, and there was a Catholic school that came by, and the students stayed at the museum for about an hour. Many of them, there's a recording booth where you can kind of record your own 60-second reflections of answering the prompt, who gives you hope? And a number of the students did that, and they had really great feedback, and I was so impressed with the students' engagement with the material.
Great. Well, congratulations on both the museum and, of course, the beautiful ad campaign. Your main website is CatholicCharitiesUSA.org. Again, give us the museum website for more information.
Sure. The museum website is peopleofhope.us.
Kevin, a joy talking with you. Thank you for all you do at Catholic Charities. Kevin Brennan is a VP of Catholic Charities USA. What an uplifting topic. Volunteerism, getting out of our comfort zone, helping others. Amazing what it does for you as well and for the entire body of Christ and beyond. We'll be right back. You can loosen your seatbelt now. The show is wrapping up. That's how I feel. It's like, woo! Moved through a lot of material today. I hope you found it helpful and insightful. I know I get so much from our guests. I love doing interviews. I love learning, continuing to learn about our faith, but really appreciate the people who do so much for us. And appreciate, again, Eric Rosales from EWTN News Nightly coming out with us this morning to give us an update and his experience as well. While he was, of course, at the dinner on Saturday night and very close to the gunman who was just behind a wall near their table, which was at the end at the back of the room. So he'll probably have more in the newscast tonight, and we're going to keep in touch and find out what they're covering and what angles they're taking, and we'll have Eric on again later in the program later this week. We have a great deal to talk about tomorrow. We are going to continue our pro-life discussion because we are your pro-life radio network. Dr. George Delgado, if you don't know who he is, you should. He is an amazing doctor who discovered and created the abortion pill reversal. And we're going to have a little bit more information on Heartbeat International's request to California to adopt the abortion pill reversal. We're also going to be looking at a lawsuit against the state of New York regarding these Dominican sisters who are just trying to help people, and now they're being demanded. They have to, according to the state, and this is why the lawsuit has come up, they have to use gender-correct terminology with the patients they're serving. It's utterly ridiculous, but they're taking it to court and they're standing up for themselves and the truth. And then Texas and the 10 Commandments, a very interesting follow-up to that developing story, how they can have the 10 Commandments in the classrooms in Texas. It's going to be another busy day tomorrow. Have a good one today. Ciao, ciao.